everybody, welcome back to Establish, brought to you by Shake Up the Establishment. We are a youth-run, nonpartisan, community-centered nonprofit that focuses on translating knowledge within various topics of climate justice to make this information more accessible to those living in what is currently Canada. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we have the privilege of living, working, and thriving upon land that Indigenous peoples have lived and cared for and continue to do so since time immemorial. We acknowledge that our address resides on Treaty 3 land, which is the territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeweki, Attawandarog, Mississaugas, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, we will be speaking with Daniel Taylor from the Greenbelt Farmers Market Network and Paul Mero from EcoSpark.
This episode is part of a larger project called The Voices of the Greenbelt, consisting of 5 podcast episodes, a mini documentary, and virtual workshops. This project has been supported by the Greenbelt Foundation. The Greenbelt Foundation's grant and research activities are made possible by the generous support of the Government of Ontario. Such support does not indicate endorsement by the Government of Ontario of the contents of this material.
My name is Atreyu Lewis. I use they, he pronouns, and I'm a two-spirit, transmasculine, non-binary, mixed Indigenous, and racialized youth. I'm a public speaker, project manager, and grassroots leader with BIPOC organizations, as well as taking part in independent research on decolonizing methodologies, epistemologies, and promoting intersectionality and harm reduction.
Well, thank you for joining us. Let's start off with just a bit of background and some of the values of the Greenbelt Farmers Market Network. I don't know a lot about it, but I have done a little bit of research with this project. I really love the goals of the network, how it really promotes inclusivity, education, nourishment, all those types of things. So could you, first of all, just describe what the Greenbelt Farmers Market Network is?
The Greenbelt Farmers Market Network is a group of about 100 farmers markets, really loosely brought together around a single goal of just building, sustaining, and kind of growing the local food impact that they have. We flow through about $2 to $3 million of local food sales. So it's like we're not really a network until there's bad weather. But we used to run, so we were founded in 2011, and I think we're both most well known for running the first market managers conference that brought together just folks that organize farmers markets from across Southern Ontario and the Greenbelt region into one room for the first time. And that's been happening every year up until the pandemic happened. And we're just waiting for things to go back. So really simply, we're an organization that just helps support farmers markets when they need help. We're there to help advocate for them, on their behalf. And we're here to just get everyone together under one roof and see what kind of synergy and organic stuff happens from that.
Thank you for sharing that. I really love how local it is and how it's amplifying local businesses and farmlands and getting those sources local. McGill actually has a farmers market, and I hope it opens this spring and summer. I think it will, because last summer it was open. In spring, it's a really interesting thing, farmers markets. Even though I don't know much about farming, I really love how it really does promote growth, professionally, in the community, economically. I really love those aspects of it, and just how there's a huge integrity to it. I think it's food sovereignty, really, and trustworthiness in the community as well. I really love that. It's so great to hear about it. So I guess I want to ask you then, what are some of the general goals of the Greenbelt Farmers Market Network?
Well, on paper, is to connect farmers with urban communities. But really, I think what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to push the boundaries of what a farmers market means. Our main goal is there's not rebranding, but it's just kind of reorienting. We all have a picture of what a farmer's market is in our heads when we think of one, right? There's it's easy to lampoon it. But let's be honest, it can be a very pastoral kind of space. They can be very white spaces and challenging for a lot of communities to break into or feel comfortable in. And they really are tailored towards a certain social economic class. We know from data we've collected and surveys that we've done that the average customer of a farmer's market is a kind of middle-aged, mid-50s white woman. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but we see if farmers markets, right, are going to have a future, they need to both reconnect with the ancient roots of what those spaces are, which is really, I mean, look at Europe, look at the Middle East, look at Asia. Markets are just everywhere, right? Street vending is an integral part of those cultures. And we spent about 50 years just wiping that clean from the North American city. So we're reintroducing like a thing that's old as time. So our real goal is how do we push the boundaries of what farmers markets can be right now, but we need a more exciting vision for what they can grow into.
Totally agree with you. I've really always been looking for like ways to connect community stuff, even in just like general public centers and like waiting rooms. And also it makes me think of this Loblaws that I used to go to when I was a kid. I still like have gone there when I go back to Toronto, but when I was younger, it was more like there were more like displays of like fresh fruits and vegetables and bakeries. Like there was an actual it was more of a life to it. You know, you could tell that there was at least a lot of things in there that were fresh and that were local. But now when I walk in there, it's very much more processed. Like they redesigned the whole thing, and it's very like you just see the packaged stuff. It's all just kind of cramped into the place, and it's really unfortunate. Even though, yeah, supermarkets definitely they're not always like they're not usually like the local choice, but just like from someone who like had to get frozen dinners as a kid, or like just general food like that, or even birthday cakes, like something simple like that. I feel like it's not as I don't know. It's just not as like fresh, or like it's not as good in a display anymore. Like you can really see how packaged and processed everything is. I also read that you're part of more specifically the Leslieville Farmers Market, which is something that it's interesting because I'm like in Toronto, pretty close to Leslieville, and they always have this farmers market. It's at like Queen and like Woodward or something.
Yep, yes, that's us.
Is that it? Yeah, it's I've always passed by there and I've always wanted to see it, but I know that during the pandemic there are a lot of communities who have used more outdoor spaces and natural spaces because it was okay to do so, following like health guidelines. So I guess I was just wondering, is that something that the farmers market has been able to do, or have they like has there been more like taking breaks because of like the pandemic?
I think, you know, when the pandemic first struck, Farmers Market Ontario, who's the provincial kind of association, along with ourselves and other groups, essentially kind of lobbied the provincial government to make farmers markets deemed essential. So they operate outside. You know, it was much safer when everyone was scared or just trying to figure out how to navigate food shopping again. And most importantly, is a lifeline for farmers because their main kind of revenue sources are markets and restaurants, and then, you know, catering and bulk sales. So restaurants disappeared overnight. You know, they weren't buying from local farms. So keeping markets open was really important. But for example, in Toronto and a lot of different other kind of municipalities around the Greenbelt, they said that you had to have a virtual option to be open. So kind of overnight, every market had to figure out like how to do online deliver, package, and sorting logistics, which like, I mean, come on, like markets are mostly run by volunteer groups. So a lot did close down. But a fair few stayed open, and mainly those that we supported, and others that really kind of jumped on with 2 feet kind of thrived during the market because they provided this really great, really essential outlet for communities to still get together in a safe way.
Yeah, it must have been really difficult to navigate during the pandemic. There was so many like back and forth between like opening, like closing of like different.
It's pretty miserable.
It is, yeah. I can also as a student too, like the opening of the university, like the classes and then the closing of them, and just like the different precautions and just like general rules like of socializing. Like it's I can't even imagine like for a farmer's market, it just must have been insane. But I am glad to hear that at least some of them did thrive and were able to work through it. Relating to that, I'm really glad that just the farmers market network exists to increase like accessibility and awareness of like seasonal food, local food. It's just so important to communities and to really like building that that like grassroots like community knowledge really. And also just like it's, yeah, like you said, equity, to understanding each other's circumstances and like what we can afford and what we can't afford, and like why local shopping and local food is so important to kind of breaking down those barriers with getting resources and also just promoting sustainability. Really, it sounds like a really great network to be a part of. So I guess I just want to ask you, maybe being a part of the network, is there something you can tell us about the farmers markets that maybe a lot of people don't know?
Yeah, sure. I think most people assume that markets are run by their cities. So I ran the Leslie Farmers Market since I was a wee tot. So this was my first one. I think I started was like 24, 25, like 10 years ago, pretty much. And I've always run that part time. Right now I still kind of do. But we have market managers that we hire for it. But most markets are run by communities and volunteers, and they make so little money, it's crazy. So, farmers markets they have a really strong economic impact by how much money flows through them. Customers right to farmers. I think what we don't really understand about farmers markets is that they're run by volunteers. The business model sucks. So farmers are doing well, but the folks organize it, no one's getting paid. Um, and that if you have one near you, you're pretty lucky, because what we're really working on as a proto industry or a sector or what have you is how the heck can you make a model to run a farmer's market? Because every developer wants one. Like there's a high demand for someone to organize these things. But we need to kind of flash it into the future and find a way for that to work. So that's something I'd say that people don't really realize about their farmers market is that they're broke.
For sharing that.
My partner was like, what?
No, like honestly, the creating of business models for stuff like this, it is really difficult. So I guess just speaking of the market, I do know that the Greenbelt Foundation is like associated with it, and they've supported it before, and they help kind of run the market network. How do you think the market network contributes to the Greenbelt's overall sustainability?
The foundation, I will not put words in their mouth, but I think it's safe to say that they've always seen value in farmers as stewards of conservation, ecological restoration. Like we know that highly diverse, sustainably run local farms, they have more wildlife on them. They're better for soil. They're just generally better for the biome that they're around, from hydrology to air or to, I don't know, that kind of stuff. But there's science involved for sure. We need to be creative with how we create economic opportunities for those farmers. And that's where we come in. So that partnership has always been kind of funding us to be that on the ground in the community actor, while they can kind of stay at 10,000 feet and have that radar perspective of the entire Greenbelt itself, and how local farmers and our work can best contribute towards those sustainability and conservation goals.
Definitely. Since in doing my own research, the Greenbelt is extremely fundamental to food security and sovereignty, and really just a regional like investment in local food and agriculture. It is a really big thing, I think. It's something I remember I drove by one of the signs on like the 407 or something. And it's just kind of something
Welcome
that
to the Greenbelt.
Yeah, welcome to the Greenbelt. Yeah, and it's just something that I'm so glad to know about more.
If you want the best visualization of the value of the Greenbelt, by the Humber River, it kind of juts down into Toronto the closest. If you're driving out of the city towards like Simcoe kind of thing, like Wasaga Beach, Solo Beach, if you drive towards there, you will see essentially big box warehouse stores. They're mostly like large warehouse store stuff, and they just stop on a street, and the street over is a farm. And I think it's the closest encroachment you have, where there's no kind of gray field, green field between development and the Greenbelt itself. Drive that little route, it's really nice, but it's I think beyond everything, we need to really always remain vigilant that a ton of people would rather if the Greenbelt just didn't exist. So it's good to kind of constantly show it off and make sure it's useful the people that live in Toronto and in those municipalities, because our votes are what keeps it alive.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, definitely. Even though, yes, like places like Toronto are super expensive to live in, I don't think the solution is to like cut down so much of, and just because it really does protect like ecologically, hydrologically, it's just so significant to the environment. It also mitigates like flooding and like just general things like that are so important to nature, and just helps us as humans really be in safe proximity to nature too. So I guess with the farmers market, definitely the Greenbelt Foundation has contributed a lot to it. It's definitely very significant to your work. I guess I just wanted to ask you, how has the Greenbelt Foundation and just contributed to the success of the Greenbelt Farmers Market Network?
I think so, the foundation, they were an early adopter. They saw the value in what this could grow into and like the opportunities there. So they provide that funding, I think, when the environment was very, very resource scarce. It was a bit of a desert. And then when we came on in 2018, things were really shifting. So that's when we saw a great chance to grow and kind of use that trampoline that the foundation had built for us to start to kind of engage new funders, engage in consulting work and building our own projects, and just leveraging the market network itself.
Honestly, yeah, like really looking at it as that's something I've been thinking about a lot, is how there are a lot of projects people do where it's very like recreation to them, like farmers markets. I have heard that before, that it has been among middle class, or just like even just generally, like it's been seen as a recreation rather than more of like a vital like community action. And I think the pandemic has really showed a lot of people how food scarcity is a thing. Even though it didn't affect maybe everyone before, it's certainly affecting everyone now. Like there's so much scarcity. I'm thinking for Inuit Indigenous peoples, it's a huge thing, like location and proximity. And it is a huge thing in terms of food security.
Indigenous food pathways can be unrecognizable to Eurocentric agriculture, right? Food forests, polycultural like development, so I think, one of the things we would love to see is broaden the definition of farming and growing.
Yeah, like farming, that type of way of agriculture and getting food, that was actually introduced, not just by Europeans, but also when Indigenous peoples were placed onto reserves. That was the main assimilation policy, is that you have to be farmers. It's like, really, we need to broaden the definitions of farming, and just like, what is it to be a food kind of preserver, and like, what does it mean to be to take part in food sovereignty. And I really love that you shared that. So I guess just to finish off, so definitely the Greenbelt plan, they've established really a land using framework to determine where urbanization shouldn't occur, to protect the current and future generations of it, and also to create a more stable economy, clean environment, social equity. And I think that's something that also the Farmers Market Network really does a lot in their work, and this initiative to really include everyone in food security and food sovereignty. Thank you, Daniel Taylor, for sharing your insightful perspectives with us. Now on to our next guest, Paul Mero from EcoSpark. So Paul, let me ask you, tell us maybe just generally about your work at EcoSpark.
Essentially, what we do is we use citizen science to actually kind of reconnect people with nature. And so, many of us will go out and we'll walk a trail and we'll look and see. It's like the trees are all green, aren't they beautiful? But we don't actually look and see like, okay, is this a healthy ecosystem or a healthy environment or not? And so today we have all kinds of invasive species in our forests that are changing the nature of the ecosystem. So what we do is we take groups of either community groups or school groups, and we teach them how to use citizen science to identify, some of the different parts of nature. And it's really great when you see, young people particularly going out and discovering there are whole communities of non-humans that live in our forests and in our streams. And it's like they see a whole new world. So I like to say we like to put the awe back into nature and help people realize that, we're not alone on this planet. There are many other communities, and, there's a natural system that works. And when we understand that system, we can make better decisions around how we use our resources and how we plan our cities and live our lives. So if you were to ask me in one sentence, I would say our goal is to put the sense of awe back into nature for young people and old people alike throughout the Greater Toronto region.
Absolutely. I love the word awe when we talk about nature. I think a lot of us really take it for granted, or nature is really seen as people really see it as an obstacle rather than something to actually take care of. And that's really where stewardship comes from. I guess I really wanted to ask you specifically, can you maybe give like an example of like citizen science? Like, what exactly does that mean?
Sure. What I'll tell you about maybe is an event that's coming up at the end of April, the beginning of May. And it's called the City Nature Challenge. It's actually a global event, and EcoSpark organizes the event for the Greater Toronto area. And essentially we use an app. It's an app called iNaturalist, and people can download it onto their phone. And then you go out into nature and you actually take pictures of plants, insects, fungi, any kind of living thing. You can take a picture, and the app will help you identify what it is. And then you save it onto the iNaturalist website. And so as individuals go out and do that, we start to build up a database of all the different species that actually live, in the Greater Golden Horseshoe with us. So you can see, how many different species of birds, how many different species of, insects, of fungus. And one of the things that EcoSpark is doing is we're mapping this out now. So, when you're looking and you're looking, what are the signs of spring? Well, the City Nature Challenge helps people realize there are certain birds that we are going to see at the very beginning of spring. We're going to see the robins, we're going to see the red-winged blackbirds. There are certain insects that come at certain times, and they breed at certain times. So citizen science is helping people go out and discover, what tools are available to them to identify the world around them and to contribute that to a research database that scientists can then use. And, last year there were over 1,000, there were over 1 million observations from around the planet of different signs of nature. And so now researchers who are looking at things like bird migrations or, any number of different research questions can go to the iNaturalist database, and they can download that information. And they can use that as they're assessing, what's happening with bird populations, what's happening with insect populations. And unfortunately, those are on the decline, and this helps them quantify that and to identify what are some of the different challenges and problems that, say, migrating birds are facing because of climate change. So it's giving citizens the tools to understand the world around them.
That's really interesting. I think for me, I can relate to that a little bit as someone who's trying to do more foraging and go more local in terms of shops. It's I'm always wondering how can I identify trees better or birds better? Just when I'm trying to collect for tea or for sap or something like that. It's something I've been interested in stewardship efforts, really. I wanted to ask you, so EcoSpark has recently launched this, the Greenbelt Youth Ambassador Program. It's a free program that's going to provide high school students around the GTA with this opportunity to experience nature better and really celebrate nature better. Can you maybe tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So the program is actually for anyone, ages, I think it's 15 to 30. So it's high school, university, and people that are recent grads from university. And essentially so when we first started the program, it's about 3 years ago, we had been planning to do a bunch of bus tours and, bring youth together in conferences and stuff. And then COVID kind of hit us. So like everyone, it kind of took wind out of our sails for a little while. But throughout this process, we've also had an education component, which was explaining to folks, what is the Greenbelt and why is it important? And as the provincial government is looking at updates and they're looking at, expanding highways and building new highways, understanding, what are the impacts of those things. And so what we've done is we've brought in experts from a whole variety of different backgrounds who have done webinars with the youth ambassadors. We've introduced them to the Ontario Environmental Registry so they can see like, what updates are happening, and if the provincial government is asking for input, can we develop a youth ambassador or youth response to that input and submit something to the Ontario Environmental Registry. So we've done a number of those as the province is looking at things like density of housing. So when they're planning new housing, and right now they're having all of the municipalities update their long-term plans based on their new density targets and growth plans. And so what we have is the youth ambassadors are actually developing a sort of standard response so that they can then take part in those processes. Because one of the biggest challenges is the youth voice is really not being heard by different levels of government, whether that's the municipal, provincial, or the federal levels of government. And it's hard to get a youth perspective because, if you're in high school or university, you're usually pretty busy. And the processes that are set up are not really geared toward helping somebody learn and understand it. It's, there's a lot of inside baseball. So what we're doing is introducing young people to people who understand the game and who can help them sort through and understand, like, what are the impacts of building new highways and new neighborhoods and subdivisions out in the middle of nowhere. And, is that going to make their lives more affordable, more fulfilling, or is it going to be we're building another neighborhood where people are going to be isolated, far away from shopping, from schools, from all the things that they need for their day-to-day lives. So, there's a big component of our program, which is just education about how our current political systems work, and the ways that young people can engage and become leaders, the leaders of tomorrow. I would say part of it is in response to looking at, many of the people who are currently involved in the battles to protect the Greenbelt, and many of the people that are engaged are, like myself, older people of a previous generation. And we're working hard to try and make sure that the next generation of leaders is coming up behind us. So that's a big part of our program, is teaching the next generation to become environmental leaders.
That's really great. I'm so glad that the Greenbelt has taken this initiative with EcoSpark. Definitely from my experience, it has been very hard from what I've seen to hear other youth perspectives, even in university. I'm grateful that I'm able to be more aware of climate science and climate change and environmentalism through different grassroots. I feel like there's been a surge of that in the past few years. Youth are really starting to understand a lot more about environment, policies, and really understanding more of the government's like work towards environment and different plans for environmental like conservation. So this youth like program seems really very interesting to me. Now, since this is a partnership like with the Greenbelt, I wanted to maybe ask you, like, could you possibly speak to some of like their goals, like the Greenbelt's goals, just as its own conservation plan?
Sure. One of the things about the Greenbelt is it's some of the best farmland that we have in Canada. Some of our top rated farmland falls within the Greenbelt. And, we currently live in this globalized world where, we go to the grocery store and we see I can get any kind of food from anywhere, just about any time. And the challenge is there's a big climate change impact from being able to buy food from anywhere, anytime. There's a lot of shipping involved in moving those, fruits and vegetables from one part of the world to the other. And we have this amazing farmland right in our own backyard. And so protecting that farmland and making sure it's there for tomorrow and for the future, when we might not have the same distribution system for our food. There are climate changes causing all kinds of disruptions all around the world. And so there are major droughts happening in areas that have been, part of the food basket for the world. And so we need to think in terms of what is that going to look like in the future? And are we protecting the farmland we will need that is close to home? So that's one of the things. The other would be, looking at protecting our air and our water quality. The Greenbelt is, it's a level of environmental infrastructure that, protects the cities around it. So when we look at things like flooding, we're seeing more storms that are more intense than they have been in the past. And one of the challenges that we have in the Greater Toronto area is we have paved over so much land that we now have so many hard surfaces that more water is running off and getting into our sewer systems. And when we have major weather events, we're seeing that back up and we're having more flooding. So making sure that we have farmland and forests and meadows, and that we're protecting the areas along our rivers and streams is really important for us in adapting to climate change and protecting ourselves from the impacts of climate change. So there's that, and then there's just a real mental health aspect as well. Living in a big city, we're bombarded with noise, and we've got all kinds of pollution, and we've got tens of thousands or 100,000s of vehicles, putting all sorts of pollutants into the air every day. And so the Greenbelt and the forests on the Greenbelt help filter that air. But there's also this really wonderful aspect, which is, we've got all kinds of great hiking trails and conservation authorities and, different places, river valleys throughout the Greater Toronto area, the Greater Golden Horseshoe, where people can get out and they can learn to relax and to slow down their life and to become one with nature again. And just to have that place to pause and to learn to love the things around us and to take our families out, and whether it's going apple picking or it's going on a wine tour or any variety of things. There's some real gems that help us in our maintaining our own mental health. So the Greenbelt serves a whole lot of different purposes. It provides great farmland, all sorts of ecosystem services and mental health services as well.
Definitely. The horseshoe has really improved like physical mental health for Ontarians who really need that like recreation. and something to do to like understand nature better. And there's also tourism in those areas. Like you said, the area is definitely, it protects a lot of farmland, wetlands, watersheds. And also Greenbelt land really provides like fertile soil and resources. It can even contribute to like moderate climates for like agricultural production and general like economy. So maybe could you possibly speak to how the Greenbelt is an economic driver in Ontario?
So as you've mentioned, there's tourism, and there are lots of great things to see and do around on and around the Greenbelt. So there are recreational opportunities, whether that's going hiking at a local conservation authority, or going canoeing, or any variety of those things. There's the employment that is provided and the food that is provided from our agricultural lands, which is a huge part of Ontario's economy. We also have some really great fruit growing areas that are part of the Greenbelt and part of the, the Greenbelt is part of a bigger protected zone. So there's the Oak Ridges Moraine, the Greenbelt, and the Niagara Escarpment Protection Plan. And as those things come together, we have lots and lots of places where you can go, and whether it's going to a winery for a tour, going and picking your own fruit. So there's a bunch of different economic opportunities there, and the Greenbelt is a big driver of Ontario's economy, and keeping us on a healthy path forward. When we think in another term, and we think about the cost of living in the Greater Toronto Area, housing is very expensive. And the thing that really drives the cost of housing is the density targets. If you're building, say 100 feet of sewer line, and you're going to serve only 4 big houses out in the country, the cost for each house to be connected to that sewer is going to be very high. Whereas if you live, in a city where there's higher population density, instead of serving 4 families with that sewer system, you might serve 20 or 30 families with that service. And so that actually helps bring down the cost of living. And if you have higher population densities, you also have more stores and services, whether that's, dentists or hairdressers, or the services we need on a day-to-day basis that are within walking distance of our homes. So it means that, we're actually building a more cost-effective future, and making a future that's actually a healthier future, because when we actually can walk and interact and get the services we need without getting into a car, it means there's more money in our own pockets, and we're living a healthier lifestyle. So we're not, we spend too much time in cars and not enough time using active transportation. And building suburbs or, urban sprawl is not, it's not inducive to active transportation, which we all need to get out and walk and interact with each other a little bit more. And the best way to do that is to leave our cars at the car lot, or, just not take it on the streets. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I've really noticed that as well. As someone who doesn't have a license, I'm definitely more of a walker, and really just using transit, and also proximity to different areas. Like you said, Toronto is extremely expensive now, for living here, for students, for youth. And now amidst like the pandemic has really impacted our ability to go to these spaces and engage with sort of like nature spaces and like protection, and really understand, like be a part of programs that help with environmental education. But there has been some leeway now that the encouragement of natural spaces, like doing things outdoors, like markets outdoors. And if we do have educational programs, doing them in like parks, wherever we can, since the indoor to like protect and like avoid transmission of COVID-19. Since the pandemic has really kind of broken out in like early 2020, how have natural spaces provided by the Greenbelt's plans, like have they helped you in any way? Have you used them?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely get out and hike on the Greenbelt hikes. And the Greenbelt Foundation on their website has a great space where they, highlight some of the different hiking areas you can go to on the Greenbelt. There's cycling tours. There are farmers markets and things. So I've definitely taken advantage of all of those things. And with the Greenbelt River Valley. So, the Humber, I live not too far from the Humber River. And, I walk the river pretty regularly. And there are, I would say, probably tens of thousands of people who walk the Humbers, the Don Valley, the Rouge, walk these rivers on a regular basis as a way to get out. And, during the pandemic, it allowed us to actually, do some social gathering, but while socially distancing and in a fairly safe way where we're not inside worried about sharing COVID and we're actually able to interact with others in a nice way. So whether it's, hiking or skiing or, just out for a local stroll. There's lots and lots of benefits that I personally have taken advantage of during the pandemic. Can I make a comment about something you were saying that you don't have a license? When I think about the youth perspective, and I think in particular to the provincial government pushing to build the new 413 highway and to build the Bradford bypass and thinking about the youth perspective, I have a friend who's got a daughter who's, in second year university or third year university, and he's been pushing her to get her license. And her response is, why would I need a license? I'm not going to have to drive. I'm going to basically call a car and it's going to come and pick me up and take me where I want to go. And she actually said to her dad, do you know how to ride a horse? And he was like, no. And it's like, well, if you were born at that transition between the horse and carriage and the car, would you be saying, well, I have to learn how to ride a horse? Or would you be saying horses are going to be obsolete as a form of transportation, so I don't need to do that? And I think that's one of the challenges for our government is, they're building infrastructure that is for yesterday and not the infrastructure we need for tomorrow, which is, building the intercity transit and making it so, you can go from, say, Burlington to Oakville to Mississauga to Brampton to Vaughan. You can go all across the Greater Golden Horseshoe using a regional transportation system instead of building more highways. So everybody is trying to do it one at a time, So that to me is one of our big concerns. How do we get that youth voice and get the youth saying, what is the world going to look like tomorrow? What is the world that I want to live in? Not, I want to see you build more of yesterday's world.
Absolutely. I've really never considered getting a license quickly. I know a lot of people get it when they're 16, 17, they really want it young. But for me, I feel like definitely walking and just taking general transit is more of my, I'm pretty comfortable with that. And I agree. I think there's a lot of ways to get around to different areas using transit. for me. Like I'm at McGill, so when I use transit in Montreal, I really just kind of like going maybe just to the gym or something, but usually I walk around because there's really a lot of good local stores and there's a lot of good parks that is easily like walkable in like walking distance. Even in Toronto, when I'm visiting Toronto, I find it's the same. I find it's like the 501, 504. It's like pretty easy to just go where I need to go that way. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, definitely like urbanization is a huge issue within Ontario. And the Greenbelt is really working to combat against that and figure out how we can increase climate resiliency. So I guess I wanted to ask you, what role does the Greenbelt really have in climate resiliency and the need to adapt to our changing environment, maybe in your perspective?
Sure. So the Greenbelt, as I mentioned, it actually helps absorb a lot of water and captures that where we need it in our farmland, which is really great. Our river valleys provide local covered areas. They help control the temperatures of the stream with the forest and the trees along the side, which provides, temperature. The water in the streams can get too warm for fish to breed and to live in the streams. And so by protecting the river valleys, we're actually protecting the life of all the species that live there. And we're filtering water in a way that, means that there's less impact on the water quality in the lake, which is where we get our water source from. So there's, the Greenbelt provides all kinds of ecosystem services for us. It reduces the temperature. So if you're looking at, a city like Toronto or whatever, cities have what they call heat sinks. And so the temperature in a city is typically a few degrees higher than it is in the surrounding area. And it also holds the heat longer. So at nighttime, when, surrounding areas often will get cooler in the evening, the city is still warmer. And that's one of the challenges that we face because while we do see daytime temperatures going up, what we see even more is the nighttime temperatures aren't coming down. And that's a real challenge, whether that's, people trying to sleep. It increases the amount of air conditioning that we need. So, all of those things, if we can protect our forests and our green spaces around the cities, will actually help us have cooler air coming into the city and help some of that heat dissipate faster, which will make our cities look more livable as well.
What I found interesting reading statistics about the Greenbelt, it protects really 78 species at risk. It produces $224 million in flood protection and $3.2 billion of like ecosystem services. There's a lot of like smart investment that I feel has been created with the Greenbelt's establishment. And it really seems like a great asset for Ontario's future and its environment. Could you maybe speak a bit more on like how the Greenbelt's establishment is an asset and a smart investment?
I guess in some ways, the Greenbelt, a big part of the Greenbelt and developing the Greenbelt was understanding the Greater Toronto area. We're looking at significant population growth over the next, 40 to 50 years. And recognizing that if we just continue with business as usual, we're going to actually pave over, as I like to say, we're going to pave over paradise. And we're going to end up with just a hot, soupy mess that is going to have all kinds of problems. So with the Greenbelt, we're saying, let's build our cities more sustainably. So let's look at better ways of doing this so that we have mixed use. So you can live, walk, and work all in the same area. You can shop in the same area. So, with establishing the Greenbelt, we sort of said we're going to put some restrictions on the way we plan, but those restrictions are going to make a better, more livable region in the long run. And they're going to help us, have access to all the different pieces of things that we need. And, without the Greenbelt, we probably would see more sprawl with, neighborhoods popping up in the middle of nowhere. We would see more farmland that's just simply being converted into subdivisions where nobody grows their own food. Everybody has, 3 or 4 cars, and and it's just not a sustainable way to live. So putting some boundaries on it makes us think differently, and it helps us to actually plan for a future that it includes many of the ecosystem services that we all need to live, even if we're not aware of them on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah.
Definitely. I feel like also with the Greenbelt, expanding it there's been a lot of calls to action to try and expand it instead of other infrastructure projects or something like that, so that like, these different regions, like ecosystems, can really have that sustainability, and they can live longer. In December 2021, there was the Greenbelt West Coalition. It was made up of 25 environmental groups. They stated that they wanted to really focus on encouraging the provincial government to expand the Greenbelt. And from what you said also about like farmland and economic factors with urban development and sprawl being a key threat to the Greenbelt, maybe can you speak to the importance of like protecting the regions, maybe on a personal level in your work?
Sure. One of my biggest concerns and fears, the things that keep me up at night are, are we going to leave a sustainable planet for young people today? And looking at, the Greenbelt that we have now, and looking at the Oak Ridges Moraine and the Niagara Escarpment plan, and you see there's a bunch of pieces and they kind of work together. But there's also lots and lots more land outside of the current Greenbelt that really should be protected. And so far we haven't done that. The Canadian government has signed a pledge to protect a certain amount of Canada's territory through parks and parklands and stuff. And Ontario has a share of that they need to take on. And we're not there yet. So, if we can look at how we bring the Greenbelt together and look at growing the Greenbelt in areas where we have very significant wetlands, where we have, very, prime agricultural land, all of those things, the sooner that we protect it and make sure that it's protected, the sooner we can think more about how do we develop sustainably in and around those boundaries. So that we have a combination of, we've got a protected land, but the people also have the access to go and to use the land for recreation and for less impactful activities than, building a subdivision and paving over it and putting in all kinds of infrastructure that means that land is only for use for a small number of people instead of everyone else, which we know as we're growing the population within the Greater Toronto Area, that we are going to need more recreational land and access to more public land that is going to help people with mental health and with all those other things. And we need to make sure that we're not paving over areas that are going to then cause more flooding downstream. So, and if we don't change the way that we're developing, if we don't expand the Greenbelt, we're going to end up with more and more of these types of problems happening on a more often basis. And they, they have very, very significant impacts economically for the people that live within the Greater Golden Horseshoe. There are lots of trucks that if they can't get through, they can't deliver the groceries to the grocery store. There are people who are trying to get home because, they have to pick up their kids from daycare, but they can't get through because everything is flooded underneath. So there are all kinds of those types of impacts that if we don't actually protect the Greenbelt and these ecosystem, these areas of healthy ecosystems, we're going to have a lot more downstream impacts as well. And so there's that cost of mitigating climate, and there's, we can spend money to try and capture carbon and store it underground, or we can actually protect the natural areas that have been absorbing carbon and protecting our environment for a long time while we transition to, cleaner fuels that just don't have the carbon emissions. So
thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. I really agree. I think definitely like for youth and for citizens, I'm really in a transition point myself from being like a youth to a citizen. Being second year university, that's really kind of what I'm really adulting, if you rather put it, and just kind of understanding how to navigate cities, like how to sustainably look after food and like engage with nature. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else you'd like to add or comment on before we end off here?
No, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the Greenbelt Foundation. Thanks to Shake Up the Establishment. We need to do a lot of shaking.
That's the idea. In this episode, we've outlined the Greenbelt's establishment, its significance, and the plethora of resources it provides to Ontarian communities. Thank you, Daniel Taylor and Paul Mero, for taking the time to share your insightful perspectives with us. And thank you, our audience, for joining us in this established episode. If you like what you hear, check out our work at Shake Up the Establishment. You can find us on our Instagram or website to continue learning about important topics like environmental stewardship, social justice issues, and political accountability. That's ShakeUpTheestab.org, and find us under the same name on Instagram. To learn more about the Greenbelt, visit the Greenbelt Foundation online.